Será que ainda existe escravatura no século XXI? Esta pergunta leva-nos ao documentário da Fundação Ajuda à Igreja que Sofre, que hoje lhe mostramos sobre a sociedade paquistanesa. No Paquistão, para lá do mundo das leis, há uma realidade que se esconde. Poderemos falar em escravatura quando falamos nos muito pobres, que são desprezados pela sociedade. Podemos falar em escravatura quando sabemos que há pessoas que pertencem às minorias religiosas e que são proscritas, que a única expectativa que têm para as suas vidas é a de varrerem ruas ou limparem esgotos. Será que ainda existe escravatura no século XXI? A resposta a isto está no documentário que esta semana lhe mostramos da Fundação Ajuda à Igreja que Sofre.
Será que ainda existe escravatura no século XXI? Talvez em circunstâncias extremas, à margem da lei e longe do olhar do mundo civilizado. Ou talvez existam sistemas inteiros que discretamente empurram as pessoas para um círculo vicioso de escravidão por dívida? Estamos no Paquistão, no interior de Sindh, habitado por tribos com raízes hindus e na sua maioria de fé hindu. Somos convidados do Padre Tomás, sacerdote columbano irlandês. Estamos prestes a partir de Mirpur Khas, uma cidade rodeada de pomares de manga, extensos campos de beterraba sacarina e fábricas de algodão.
We're going to a village called Bethlehem, which is a newly established village after the flooding. So the land was bought, a plot was given to each family, foundations were made for the house, and then they built the rest themselves gradually. So it had two purposes, to rescue people from the bad effects of the floods, and the other is to get them away from the abandoned labour, which means that they're free now from the landlords. They're not living on the landlord's land, they're living in their own plot. There's cotton factories nearby. They're not too far from the city, where they can go and find daily work. So it's a step, towards some kind of liberation, some kind of freedom from debt and from dependence on the landlord. So, tick-tock. Tick-tock. So, ete kush so. Kapaswala. So they're working in the cotton factory nearby. Diari kitne hai? 400. That's around $3 a day. So all these go to the village school here. Kitne jana?
6 में जाएंगे.
You just कौन से school जाएंगे फिर?
Sir Michael.
Sir Michael. So you Sindhis, Baluchis, Punjabis, Pathans, which are the 4 largest ethnic groups. And within that, then you have the smaller tribal groups, especially here in Sindh. There's be Parka Kolis, there'll be Kutchi Kolis, there'll be Mawari Beals, Sindhi Beals, Darthi, and many other groups who historically would have been from the low caste Hindu background. But the thing they have in common is that in the traditional caste system that has existed in India for 5,000 years, that would have been among the lower caste, what's called non-scheduled caste. Tick-tock, push.
Viemos visitar uma aldeia dos que usam a terra do proprietário. É assim que se chamam as pessoas que vivem e trabalham em terras que pertencem aos latifundiários. Não é a primeira aldeia onde estas pessoas vivem. As cheias destruíram completamente as suas colheitas em 2011 e, como nos contam, tendo contraído dívidas para com o anterior proprietário desonesto, viram-se forçados a vender praticamente todo o seu gado. O atual proprietário assumiu a dívida da família de mais de 2.000 euros e é por isso que estão aqui. As colheitas foram boas, principalmente cana-de-açúcar e algodão, apesar da destruição provocada pelas chuvas deste ano. O novo senhor cobrou-lhes o custo da replantação, assim como do aluguer do trator. A sua dívida duplicou.
Many of these people cannot read or write. So when it comes to the end of the year, when the crop gets cut, say the sugarcane is gone off to the factory, the landlord gets paid, the labourer will not know because he's not able to read if this is an accurate account. He says they're more in debt than they actually are, even though they would have worked the whole year and supposed to get their share of the profits from the crop. But that doesn't happen. So it's a vicious circle that keeps on going. Somebody in the family may get sick, so you need a loan to treat, somebody in the family. There might be marriage in the family, so you get a loan. In a sense, the landlord is your banker. It's a relationship of dependence, as well as being a relationship of oppression. The debt will carry on from generation to generation because it's usually an extended family that will be working together. It is illegal for a landlord to give a loan to a labourer. It's the law of the country, but it's not being implemented. For a number of years, the late 90s and into the 2000s, where the Human Rights Commission began to take cases against landlords. So they used the courts. So at that time, maybe around 3,000 people were freed from different landlords around Sindh. Church, would we take them on in these people? They were all Hindu, they weren't Christian. So there was a big reaction from the landlords that time. They attacked the church land. Many of the people were beaten up and some were taken away, kidnapped by the landlord. It's the first time that the boundary labourers realised that they can fight a little back.
O padre Tomás às vezes procura intervir em nome dos AIS, defendê-los contra a justiça. Tenta saber mais sobre as atitudes da outra parte, encontrar uma solução de compromisso e, através dela, um caminho para sair de uma situação difícil. O diálogo é a chave, especialmente nestas situações tão delicadas que, de outra forma, poderiam acabar mal para aqueles que procurou defender, assim como para a presença missionária no país, onde as relações comerciais entre o poder e a religião são uma realidade. O conhecimento é a chave e é por isso que vamos encontrar-nos com um dos proprietários.
The landlords over here, they are feudal lords.
Yeah. Do you see that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a very bad thing.
Very bad thing. You could tell us
You
more?
don't get your right.
Yeah. You mean the Harry doesn't get his rights, or?
Zimindar doesn't get his right.
Yeah.
Again, the Hari is a political figure. They are just asking to beg from the government.
But say most Harrys would be in debt to their landlords. Is that not
Yes,
true?
they are always in that debt
If a
because
Harry is in debt to his landlord, then the landlord has control.
yes,
Yeah. But I've been living in Sindh since 1993, 26 years. I'm a minister to our Christian community, so that takes me to the villages, So I've heard many stories, seen many instances where the Harrys are in difficulty, they are in debt.
they are not very well off, and they have got the unity, and they have got comrades who help them, who guide them, go to the court, go to the police station against the Zimindar, against the landlord, and just run away.
You remember the late 90s, reading the newspapers and hearing stories about a few landlords keeping private jails.
There were few private jails. They used to chain them.
Yeah.
It's a fact. They used to. But there are very few landlords who misuse Haris. not every landlord.
How do you give the Harris their rights, and also that the landlords can, and the land can be tilled, the crops can be grown, and the people in the country can get food? How do you solve the tension?
Nowadays, we are afraid of from these Haris. If we pay them more, they will run away. Now if he demands 3,000 rupees, we give him only 500 rupees. Because of their reputation, we don't trust.
Good evening, sir. So
अरे तोटला वाली सोकरीन तो तेड़ो
they would have their own lands. Those lands would be mostly desert lands. Many migrated from those areas into what we call here interior Send, where the land is more fertile, where there's water, where there's canals, where there's large landlords with big holdings of land. So they began to get working on the lands of landlords. They were called Harries. Harries is the Sindhi word for labour, but in effect it is what we call bonded labour, because the labourers and their families are constantly in debt to their landlord, then he has control over them, so it's a form of semi-slavery. In Sindh, Islam was brought by the Sufis, which is more tolerant Islam. But without a doubt, there is discrimination against minorities, whether it's in the textbooks in the schools. If you go as a Christian or a Hindu, apply to get a government job, won't get the jobs. Forced marriages. Some people in society thinking we can take anybody that we want, and the people are too weak and poor to fight back. So there's been many well-documented blasphemy cases against particular Christians. Christian colonies have been attacked. I suppose in all my years here, the atmosphere has become more and more difficult. The discrimination from the bonded labour system is as much because of the caste system as from the religion. The majority of landlords are Muslim. There is some Hindus, some high caste Hindus live in, not many, but there's some. There's no Christian landlords. The majority of the tribal peoples are still Hindus. Some have become Christian in the 50s and 60s, in the years after partition with India. Pakistan became an independent country. They would have felt an attraction to the church because the church would give them a sense of security. But they're also attracted to the church for maybe a deeper reason, because the teaching of Jesus of everybody's equal, especially his focus on the poor, his focus on reaching out to those who are considered low in society.
Proscritos. O padre Tomás alega que, depois de 5.000 anos, a escravatura ainda existe, acima de tudo, na mentalidade. Não só daqueles que nasceram num ou noutro dos grupos mais baixos e desprezados. Não existe a possibilidade de igual acesso à educação, saúde ou emprego. O que fazem os proscritos, os mais pobres dos pobres, que também são membros da minoria hindu ou cristã. Nas cidades, varrem as ruas, limpam os esgotos e têm pequenos negócios de venda ambulante. Vivem dia a dia. E, assim como no Punjab, famílias inteiras dedicam-se a um dos trabalhos mais difíceis e mal pagos, como a produção e cozedura de tijolos de barro.
Husband and wife, and their son, and his wife. That's 4 adults, who work here making the bricks. They can make 1,200 bricks each day, so they earn €4 a day. Their debt at the brick kiln was €235 at the moment, so that's a lot of money for them. The monsoons were very heavy this year, so this has just started up recently since the rain stopped. So when the rains are going on, kiln closes down, because you cannot make bricks in the rain. So during the 2 or 3 months, whatever long the monsoon lasts, there's no work. So they live by taking an advance from the owner of the brick kiln. So that is one of the reasons they go into debt. It's extremely hard work. Children are not going to school. The children are also involved in the work. When the bricks are left here in the sun to dry, after a few days they need to be turned, and the smaller, gentler hands of the children do that work so that they won't spoil the edges of the bricks. It's just a constant cycle of debt that they can never break out of. The church in many parishes around the diocese has bought land near the towns and given plots of land to people who want to move into the town. So that has been one strategy, one way of trying to get people to break away from the bonded labour of landlords, that at least when they come and sit in their own, live in their own plot, build their own house, they're more independent. When they're living together, there's more sense of unity and more sense of strength. The gospel message of Jesus' words and actions are integrated. You can speak of liberation, spiritual liberation, whatever, even psychological liberation, but in some ways they all go together. You try to respond to the health needs, education needs, and then those who become Christian try takes, catechize, evangelize, to deepen the faith. It's still a young church. It's only within the Park of Holies, just 3rd generation. It takes a long time to internalize the liberation message of the gospel. You're talking about millennium of a caste system for those outside of it who are non-human. So maybe the biggest challenge is that healing wounds that are there for generations and generations. One way I think is just go back to Luke 4. Jesus in the temple proclaiming for Messiah. Come to bring the good news to the poor, liberty to the oppressed. That's almost like Jesus' mission statement. It's also strong in other parts, the Beatitudes in Matthew. It presents a God who's on the side of the poor, but who's also merciful to all. They've been here 27 years. And it's hard to name, articulate what keeps one here, you know? So many things go wrong, the corruption in the country, the oppression, the injustice people suffer. Sometimes you break my heart, sometimes I think you are my heart. And that's what Pakistan does for me. The biggest learning is for me the resilience. The people who suffer so much still want to live, still want to hope, still want a better life for themselves and their children. That is awe-inspiring and challenging. But it also teaches one that suffering is very much part of life. The cross is very much part of life. I don't mean it in a negative way or a life-denying way. Pain, suffering, is part of the human dynamic, is part of the human existence. And when you work with the tribal people who've been oppressed for centuries, who endure that suffering, then you cannot deny it. You have to embrace the suffering that you see around you. You cannot try to heal, save the people that you're with without something also happening to yourself. Still a long way to go. But embracing the pain and the suffering of the world, trying to embrace the hope and the joy of the world, and to, I suppose, to be seduced by God.
Deus que está ao lado dos pobres. O batismo dá liberdade. Não apenas a liberdade mais profunda, inexplicável, que nos torna livres mesmo quando estamos cativos, mas também aquela liberdade muito real, a liberdade física, que vem com a libertação da dependência de uma dívida de gerações, de alguém que nasceu numa parte melhor da sociedade ou do mundo. Uma liberdade ligada à terra e à comunidade. Como escreveu São Paulo, afinal, não recebemos um espírito que nos escravize e volte a encher-nos de medo, mas recebemos um espírito que faz de nós filhos adotivos. Somos todos filhos e herdeiros do próprio Deus. Sofremos com Cristo e com Ele viveremos.